maps, and meta-analysis. This is Folsom.
Facts.
And faces.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Folsom Facts and Faces. We are continuing our coverage of the 2024 election with yet another candidate interview. This time we have Dustin Silva. Dustin, if you don't mind, for our listeners, can you introduce yourself, what you're running for, and what convinced you to run for this position?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Dustin Silva, I'm running for District 2 City Council here in Folsom. I've been currently I'm employed with the Sheriff's Department. I've been with the Sheriff's Department for 25 years. Right now, I'm a captain and I oversee our investigations division. Um, Running for political office was not either, something kind of in the back of my mind. It wasn't really anything I knew, how to go about it, what the first steps were, and that sort of thing. And then last summer there was a big uptick in violent crime in Folsom, and one of those crimes happened to occur at the park next door to my house. It's the park where I've taken my kids since they were babies. They, played on the swings. I coach football right now. That's where my junior football team plays. So it really hit close to home. And what it was two homeless individuals were kind of made camp in the bathrooms over there and ended up getting into a knife fight and stabbing each other. They shut the park down for like half a day. While they were processing the scene, one of the officers on scene ended up getting stabbed with a needle. So it was a big deal. And that it wasn't confined just to my park. That's what brought it to my attention more than anything. But there was stuff at over by the library. There was stuff in Old Town. And just yesterday, they arrested a homeless individual for starting a fire at one of the historic buildings down there. So this, Folsom's always kind of been not a high crime area. And that's one of the reasons I moved here back in 2011, because to raise my family, it's a great place to raise a family. The schools are great. There's low crime. But over the years, that public safety has deteriorated. And I knew with my background that I could immediately come into the city council and make an immediate difference. So, that's my goal. I have the experience to do it. I've worked a lot in the homeless arena with the sheriff's department. I was in charge of overseeing the Sheriff Jim Cooper's policy on homelessness. And we've done some great things there. And even now, there's still an issue. I mean, it's not fixed, but the difference between before we started that policy and up to now is huge. There's no more large camps in the county. We've got rid of them. We've got a ton of people help. We've held those that are breaking the law accountable. And basically what we're doing is just enforcing the laws that are already on the books, and making sure people that needed help got help, and the people that didn't want help and wanted to break laws and affect the quality of life within an area, that they're held accountable for that. So that's the main reason I'm running, and kind of the genesis of how that happened.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dustin. I wanted to kind of, ask a quick question. You've kind of, told us some of your motivations for running. Why is this position on the city council the right position for what you want to accomplish? Or kind of to think of it a different way, what could you do in this role that you can't, normally do in your day to day?
Yeah, absolutely. So the city council is what sets the tone for the city. The city council is the one that directs policy, has a vision for the future of our city, and it's the leadership of our community, chosen by the community, right? And the number one issue right now, statewide, and I know here locally, is public safety. And I think it's time that there's somebody, on that council that has that background, is able to, navigate those waters. I can come in day one and start getting things done, especially, excuse me, especially kind of in the financial situation we are in now. We have no idea if Measure G is going to pass, and we're going to get those extra funds for public safety. If we don't, we have to have somebody in there who can come in and say, hey, these things are going to work. This is where we need to focus, and to get the best bang for our buck. Right. So Having somebody come in with none of that experience and trying to just throw things at the wall and see what sticks, I don't think is what the public wants right now. They want to know that they're safe within their communities. They can go to the parks without dealing with the garbage left over by the homeless, or having to not be able to use picnic tables because homeless are sleeping on them, that sort of thing. So I think as a city council, it's more of a change in mindset. The public safety has to be prioritized, where I don't think it has in the last decade.
Gotcha. Thank you. Kind of flipping that question on its head a little bit. If you weren't successful in your run for this position, what do you plan to do to continue working on those priorities with the city?
Well, number one, regardless if I win, I obviously think I'm going to win. But if not, this is still my home. It's still my community. I care a lot for the people that live here, and I want them, especially the youth. I'm the only candidate that's raising a family, or only candidate in District 2 that's raising a family in this city right now. So it's very important to me that the youth are prioritized in their safety and what they. I mean, we have great sports programs. We have a ton of activities for kids. A lot of that centers around, parks and that sort of thing. If they're unsafe to go there, then people are going to stop using them, So whatever I can do in the future, regardless of the outcome of the election, I'm going to do it, especially even in my position with the sheriff's department. Law enforcement agencies work a lot together. So if I can, come up with a cooperative way that we can work with the sheriff's department and Folsom PD, something like that. No, I'm going to do it. Anything that benefits the city and it is going to make affect the quality of life for the people that live here. I'm going to do.
Awesome. Kind of touching a little bit more on some of those, plans and changes. And you've already answered some of this already, so this is kind of just a chance to maybe reiterate on those points. But what kind of tangible changes could, Folsom residents expect to see if you do win your race?
Number one starts with the police department. We have less officers now, and I'm sure you guys heard this before, but less officers now than we did in 2008. Well, the city has grown considerably since then. So we need to get to a level that's appropriate for our city size. And there's no set number, right? But what I would like to see is, at least 1.1 officers per thousand. I think that would be ideal for our city, and how it's laid out, the population density, that sort of thing. We take all that into effect. So number one is getting our police department adequately staffed. Number one. Number two, and this is actually a big one. It doesn't get talked about a lot. Is bringing a community prosecutor to Folsom. So at the sheriff's department, we work with community prosecutors, and basically what that is a district attorney who is assigned to whatever jurisdiction it is, right? So we have one for our North County, one for the South County. But their sole focus is basically quality of life issues to wherever they're assigned. So if you have an absentee landlord, right, and their tenants are causing problems in an area, that attorney will work with the landlord, property management companies, whatever it is, to take care of that problem. If you have an abandoned business that's being overrun and used by homeless, the community prosecutor can work with that business owner or property owner, to alleviate those problems. They can also they run the chronic nuisance offender program, right? So right now in Sacramento County, if a person is arrested a certain amount of times, because we all know right now, California is pretty soft on crimes, and being arrested for something doesn't mean you're going to do jail time. It most of the time means you're going to be given a ticket and sit on your way. Well, if you get a certain number of those, the DA's office will prosecute you as a chronic nuisance offender, and can actually put you in jail for it, and where you will receive treatment, mental health treatment, drug treatment, whatever it is, whatever's causing those core issues of why that person's a problem. So I think that would be a really huge asset to Folsom, is to have a community prosecutor assigned to Folsom working on Folsom problems. And then number three is working with our property owners, business owners, And this is something the community prosecutor also will help with is starting P bids within this area. So property business improvement districts, basically what they are. And what that is property owners and business owners within a certain district, it's will pay into a fund, and then those funds are used for um, issues specifically in that area, right? So maybe it's beautification, maybe it's cameras, whatever that district needs, they can spend that money on that. And that's a program that's run through the county, is it's kind of spearheaded by the DA's office, and it's a great program. I don't. I don't want to say it's a magic bullet, and maybe it won't work in certain, but I definitely see it being successful and working in certain areas of Folsom. So those would be my three main things that I'd want to get done right away. Those are all things that I have experience with, I've worked with in the past, and those are kind of real quick, easy fixes, right, to kind of get us to where we need to be.
Gotcha. Thank you. I feel like that was really detailed and helpful
Yeah.
for our listeners, especially that portion about the community prosecutor. Um, Kind of turning into your campaign for a second, what would you say have been the biggest challenges so far for this cycle?
Man, I don't. This is the first one I've ever ran, man. So like I was telling you guys earlier, I'm having a good time doing it. So I mean, yeah, even the walking, man. I put on 9 miles the other day on my watch walking last week, and so I mean, even that I'm like, oh man, now I know I like walking. I didn't know that, so I haven't had any big challenges. Um, the people I've talked to have been real nice. I mean, I don't I've enjoyed it, so there's nothing to complain about here. Yeah. As far as just straight campaigning, the campaign goes.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, then we can kind of, get into some more specific questions relating to, your campaign specifically and your experience as well. I'm going to take a stab at one relating to your experience with the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office real quick.
Yeah.
We noticed in your role there, you highlight that you have, served as a grants manager within the department. What opportunities do you see for Folsom in the grant space as an additional source of funding?
But, I mean, there are grants for everything out there. I mean, and um, identifying those grants, going out and getting them, yes, that is important, right? But more importantly to me is having somebody with the experience who's dealt with grants before, right? Because there's nothing worse than applying for and getting a grant and then not knowing what you're getting, right? So every grant is different. They all have different uh, requirements, reporting requirements, and a lot of times there's unintended costs or unseen costs with those grants. And I'll give you an example. One of the grants I oversee right now, um, we have a full-time body that just deals with that grant, right? So they do all the accounting, everything. So if you didn't know any better and you just were like, hey, we're getting, free money, we're getting this grant, but then you have to hire somebody to actually administer it and manage it. So that's a cost that somebody without experience in that arena, you might jump at the chance to get the free or to get the grant for whatever project it is, not realizing what the actual out-of-pocket costs are going to be. Another example is I think the city applied for a grant a while back to get some sort of vehicles, electric vehicles, right? Everybody was pretty excited about it. But then once you start thinking about it, it's like, okay, do we have the infrastructure? Do we have the charging stations? Do we have anybody who is qualified to maintain those vehicles? And so without that kind of forward thinkingness and experience of dealing in that arena, I mean, you're going to have people that get those, receive those funds, not knowing what the consequences of that are. So when I talk about my grant experience, that it's more about what grants we want to stay away from, what money we want to go to. Some of them have, a matching requirement or whatever it is. To me, that's the most important part about going after grant money. It's not what there is, because there's grants for pretty much anything that you can apply that you want to apply for, but knowing which ones to go after, what's going to cost us, and what's going to be most beneficial to the city of Folsom. That's the important part.
Interesting. Appreciate your insight on that. And brief follow up.
Mhm.
To that, I was kind of curious, do you think that there's, any amount of maybe small, maybe a lot of grants today that the city of Folsom could be taking more advantage of that we aren't currently?
No, absolutely. At the sheriff's department, we got, I think it was the year before last, we received a $9 million grant for organized retail theft, right? Um, most of the cities in this area, I'm not sure if Folsom applied or not. I don't think they did, but most of the cities didn't apply for it, right? That's $9 million that we got at the sheriff's department, that funds officers, funds, records officers. It's funding equipment, and it's been super successful. We've arrested over 1,000 people, and recovered over $50,000 worth of merchandise directly related to the people we have working under that, under that pot of money. But yes, there's grants for equipment. There's grants for technology. There's grants for, for actually for officers. So whatever our needs are, there are grants and there is money out there. But again, it goes back to, what's the cost of receiving that money, and is it worth it to the city of Folsom?
Gotcha. Thank you. I work on grants for my night job, so super
Oh,
interested
okay.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I also have a follow-up on that. Do you
Yeah.
feel like the city of Folsom, because you mentioned like we didn't even apply for some of these grants,
Uh-huh.
do you feel like we have the requirements to be a competitive bidder on a lot of these, and the issue is that we're just not putting ourselves out there?
What, that's tough to say, right? I don't know if they have somebody that actively, or if a person that actively goes out and looks for those. I bet you a lot of it comes down to, like, when they start looking at them, right? Does this grant require matching funds? To where the position that the city's in right now, we might not be able to take those grants just because we can't afford them, right? So it I would say we could be more aggressive on going out and looking for that money. Definitely, yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mhm.
I feel like
Yep.
we talked about grants for a bit, so I'll switch gears a little bit.
Well,
Um,
it's funny when I
yeah.
saw that picture, that question in there. I was like, I haven't been asked that before,
Mhm.
but it makes sense now that you have experience in that area.
Yeah, yeah. Also, I just feel like, with the whole conversation around the city budget, any source of
Yes.
funding other than Measure G, because that's its own separate thing, is
Yeah.
interesting to dig into.
Mhm.
One of the other issues that's important to you in your campaign, though, is public safety. And this is an area where it really feels like you lean on your experience. And in particular, one of the issues listed on your campaign website is SAC-RT transit. And
Yes.
specifically, that you have a desire to make it more of a safe and viable option for commuters. From your perspective, what hazards plague Folsom residents today on RT, and what would you do as a council member to remedy that?
So just a little bit about my background. I was in 2008, I was working in narcotics. That was when the recession hit, right? So we lost a bunch of positions. We shut down our narcotics team. And so I ended up going back and working still through the sheriff's department, but as a deputy assigned to regional transit. So for about a year, I worked there. And regional transit is a good resource there, and it does get used. I know that it's gets complained about a lot, especially here in Folsom, but it is used, and I want it to continue. But I've been on there. I've seen, what happens on those trains, especially in the non-peak hours, right? So outside of the commute hours, it can be a rough place. And SAC PD just pulled all their officers out of it, so they're having troubles with security at RT right now. Yeah. So number one is we have to have a good relationship with regional transit. And some of the things that I would want to look at is um, limiting the number of trains that come during those non-peak hours, right? Because it's silly for that train to be coming up here with one or two people on it, which happens regularly, right? Outside of commute hours, there's rarely a large amount of people on that train, when it's not during the commute. So that's number one. Number two is ensuring that RT effectively secures their stations, puts the resources they need into making sure that the trains are safe for number one, the ridership, right? The people that are riding it, but then number two, at the stations, we don't want RT to be, um, the criminal train that, people are riding up here to, go, shoplift to, burglarize and then hop them right back on the train and, getting out of town. So we got to make sure that there's some responsibility there, or there is some responsibility there to RT if they're going to run their trains into our city to make sure that they're not the cause of the uptick in crime. And it's going to start with a good relationship with RT, starting that dialogue, and then um, making them aware of what we want to happen.
Well, thank you for that, Dustin. I wanted to go back, and this is something you mentioned really early on. The increase in crime, violent crimes in the Folsom area. The question that I had for you was, timeline wise, it's kind of related, and I was curious, given your expertise, like what kind of impact did COVID have on crime in Folsom? And you've already mentioned violent crime in particular, but we were curious, what kind of crimes, have presented the most danger for Folsom citizens, kind of coming out of the pandemic.
Well, uh, and it's hard to say what effect, yeah, COVID had on it. And I don't think it's, COVID. I think it's more of a um, tolerance of theft that maybe came with, or tolerance with crime that came with COVID, right? People became apathetic. People were stuck in their houses. People, it was kind of just a dark haze over the entire area during that time. And it was, it was rough on a lot of people. And so crime, I don't want to say it became accepted, but it kind of did, right? We're seeing these videos of people just walking in, stealing items from the stores and walking out with no consequences, nothing happening. So when it becomes that common and becomes that, where you see every day, and it's not a shock when you see that happen, of course, people are going to like, okay, that's just what happens now. I think we're in a good spot right now. People are kind of getting fed up with it. We have Prop 36 on the ballot this year, which is a huge win, and hopefully it passes. I think it will. It's polling. At one point, it was over 80% statewide, which is really kind of unheard of for anything. So I think it's going to pass. It'll give us a good tool to hold people accountable, and really get people help that need it. But I mean, connecting COVID to it and COVID and I mean, that's you could probably write an entire thesis on it, and so it'd be hard for me to say anything definitively, kind of on what that relationship was.
Funny you mentioned you could write a thesis on it. My master's thesis was on how COVID impacted public engagement. So
Okay,
it's
yeah,
kind of funny.
yeah.
And then you mentioned Prop 36 there. I actually just recorded an episode the other night on different propositions that are on the state
I,
ballot, and that one most recently had polling at over 70% approval as of like the beginning of this month. So in all likelihood, will pass.
yes, yeah. At one point, I know it had gone down. I think the opposition done some put out some negative ads and stuff against it, but so it went down a little bit. But yeah, when it first got on, yeah, it was at like 80%. And Jim Cooper came from the assembly where we're talking about it. He's like, "Oh man, that's unheard of. That's really high for any sort of initiative." So
Well, I feel like we've talked a lot about your experience with law enforcement and your vision for public safety during the course of this interview, and through your campaign, you've definitely talked a lot about it as well. What are some other ways that you could speak to on how you've been involved with the Folsom community?
Um, so as soon as I moved here, it was number one, I've always kind of been a person that likes to be out there, likes to be involved, and likes to do what I can for my community. So when we first moved here, my baby or my son was, I think, a month old when we moved here, and like I mentioned earlier, that's why we did come here. We're having kids, wanted to raise them in this town. But I started looking for ways to get involved, and with young children, it became very easy because I got involved with their sports early, right? So his first T-ball team, I was the coach of for a few years. But since then, I've gone into coaching with football. So it's the junior program, basically, what is it? Third through eighth grade. And it has been one of the most incredible journeys that I've been on. I've got to meet some of the most incredible kids. They keep me sane. They make me laugh. It's one of the funnest things I've ever been involved in. Um, and this is actually, so my kid's in eighth grade. So this is technically, most of the time people stop coaching when their kids get out of the program, but I've loved it so much. I'm going to continue. It's just the kids keep me young, man, keep me on my toes, make me laugh. And it's one of the most cool things that I've ever been involved with. Anything to do with the youth, I'm very involved with. I went and presented medals at the Special Olympics during the summer. It's just anywhere that I can fit in and try and make a difference and help people and make people's days better. That's kind of what I try and do. But especially in the sports world, just because that's kind of what I know and what I really enjoy.
Wow, I really appreciate that. I had the opportunity and the privilege, frankly, to be involved in Folsom coaching as well throughout my youth, and I could say what a rewarding experience it is. So there's no question in my mind why that's such an impactful thing for you
Yeah.
personally.
And man, so I was out walking the other day or yesterday actually, handing door to door, handing out pamphlets. And this kid goes freaking zooming by me on a bike. Dude, he locks it up in the middle of the road, comes pedaling back as fast as Coach Silva, what's up, man? Blah, blah, blah. It was just like, oh man, this is one of the coolest things, man. You're just out in the streets and you see your kids that you got to coach. And yeah, I've loved it a lot.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for like sharing all these different perspectives, and sharing your expertise with us as well and our audience. This is, now kind of the time where we, give a chance for you to, tell us anything else about, you or your campaign that we hadn't already covered with our questions.
Um, well, no, thank you guys, number one, for having me on here. I mean, like I said earlier, this was incredible, and I'm really glad that somebody did something like this. I'm sorry I couldn't get on sooner. But yeah, number one, I think when you look at all the candidates running for District 2, especially public safety being the number one issue in the city right now. I mean, the choice, I'm the only choice in that arena. I have the experience. I've dealt in that or been in that realm for, over 2 decades. And I run a division now. The division I run right now has a $40 million budget. I have over 100 employees that work for me. And I've always been in leadership positions, no matter where I was at in the department, even patrol. Fairly when I was first starting out as a patrolman, I was placed as the officer in charge for the day, even before I promoted to sergeant. So I've always kind of sought out and been successful in leadership positions. And so I think the step to the city council will be seamless for me. Number one. I have a vested interest in this city. Like I said earlier, I'm raising children in this city. I want it to be the safest place, in America, right? I mean, and we're not far off that. Folsom is a great place. It's always ranks very high as safe cities, and we've kind of started to lose that. And so I want to make sure we maintain that and get back to that level that everybody expects from us. And a lot of times, it's the reason people move here, right? So that was for me. So I can come in day one. I've worked. I was also on the Government Affairs Committee with the Sheriff's Department. So I've worked with state legislatures, federal legislators, county legislators, and pushed legislation. I've written legislation, opposition to different bills. So I have that experience too, and navigating kind of the government. Which I think will be very helpful. There's no learning curve there. I can step into it right away. And we also, I think, in the city need to have a good relationship with the county, right? Because the county controls the purse strings on a lot of different monies and funds that we could use here in Folsom. I've met with each supervisor individually, especially on homeless issues. I've met with them each individually on different issues within their districts. I know them. That again is something seamlessly I can come in and start doing. But other than that, and I'm excited about it, man. I want to get to work. I want to, dig my heels in and, start trying to make Folsom back to, kind of what it was prior to COVID, prior to, kind of the crime spike that we've seen. Make sure our kids continue to have a safe place to, grow up and, enjoy their childhood and hopefully move on from here and become the next leaders of this generation.
Well, thank you, Dustin. We really appreciate your time and your articulation of your vision. And thank you, everyone who was listening.